Hello, I'm Haslinda Amin. He was born in the Soviet Union but called Singapore home. Sergey Bolusov is a serial entrepreneur who puts knowledge at the heart of everything he does. He's founded more than 24 companies, among them Acronis, a data protection firm valued at more than $1 billion. Sergey Bolusov is today's high flyer. Born in what was then Leningrad to a family of physicists, Sergey was in college when the Iron Curtain came down. He studied science and mathematics, he says, because there are no politics in numbers. From the age of 10, he was making things to sell for money, taking odd jobs to fund his way through college. From physics to computer science, a degree to a PhD, Sergey's CV includes a company he formed at 21 to help students succeed in exams. At 23, he started a company that would become one of the biggest consumer electronics makers in Russia. But it's in software, data protection and storage where he's made his biggest mark. The company Sergey now leads as CEO, Acronis, protects the cyberspace of more than 500,000 companies across the globe. Sergey Bolusov, welcome to High Flyers. Pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you.
Well, your parents are scientists. You were trained in physics, chemistry, mathematics, yet here we are talking about your journey as an entrepreneur. How did you get interested in starting a business?
No, first of all, when I was born in Soviet Union, business was sort of illegal. So you wouldn't be wanting to be in business if you have creativity, because that would mean that you become a criminal and likely go to jail. That's not a good idea, right? And so if you wanted to be creative, you can become an artist, a scientist. And I chose science. My parents are scientists. But then the businesses which I started, they all related to technology. So even the first business was education. Second business was computer. And so it was always related to technology. And so my physics training helped me, because in physics, in modern physics, you don't do any research without computers or without specialized hardware which you build. So you're actually trained in computers, and so it helps you.
A lot of founders go to Harvard, even if it's just for a couple of months, just to get that Harvard stamp. I mean, what do you make about your own education? You went to the top school in the Soviet Union.
I think people confuse cause and effect with correlation. And so in this case, you have a correlation of people who go to Harvard. Of course, it helps primarily because you meet the right people. So you meet people who you can hire into your business. So for me, most important thing about my education was the fact that because it's competitive, so very, very good people were there. And I got to meet them, and when I started my first business, my second business, my third business, it was helpful that I can actually hire those people. My classmates, they are professors in Caltech, in Berkeley, in MIT, in Harvard, in Oxford, in Cambridge, in computer science, in mathematics, or in physics. And so it's quite helpful to be able to have access to them and to people around them, to hire them into my technology businesses.
You've always been enterprising. You started as young as 10 years old.
I was, but I wasn't really doing it consciously. I was just doing it because I needed something. So, for example, I liked fishing when I was a kid, and it was necessary to buy fishing equipment. And my parents didn't have a lot of money, and so I needed to somehow figure out the way to make money. I didn't think about it as money. I just thought about it as expenses, which I would use to buy some fishing equipment to fish. And we didn't fish at that time in order to enjoy it. Like, what amazed me about like fishing and fly fishing, for example, in US, is that you let the fish go. This is crazy. And you actually ate the fish. You fished to eat it.
But from what I gather, you also saved enough to buy the family the first black and white TV. The red edition. What was that?
It wasn't buying a family. It was I wanted to watch TV, and my parents didn't have a TV, and I always needed to go to my friends to watch TV, and so I bought it for myself to watch TV. That's it.
What were some of the lessons learned when you dabbled in business at a very young age, and what were some of the key takeaways as you venture into all the companies that you started?
I think a lot of success comes from the habit. And so one of the habits which is useful to be successful is to be working a lot. And so, the way I was growing up is that we never really had vacations. Vacation was something which was sort of an anti-word. So if you are ready to work, to have, for example, 100 meetings a week or and to have 100 hours a week, then you can be more successful because most of business is competitive. It's not about you doing well, but it's about you and your team doing better than some other team. And if you work more, you have higher chances of succeeding.
You spent your formative years in the Soviet Union. In fact, you spent your first 21 years there. What was it like growing up?
It was poor, and it was bad quality and of everything, bad quality of products, bad quality of food, bad quality of organization, bad quality of airports, bad quality of airlines, bad quality of advertising. For example, there was a single airline in Soviet Union called Airflot, and yet it was advertising everywhere, fly Airflot. And it was sort of caricature because if you think about it, fly Airflot, what else can you fly? There is nothing else, right? So if you want to fly, you fly Airflot. But as a result of it, you get to be appreciating good quality and the difference between bad and good quality more, I guess. Another thing which is good is that apparently access to science, access to knowledge has nothing to do with the amount of money. And so even though it was very poor, it had very, very high quality science. And that was helpful. So there was a lot of good scientific books. Mathematics wasn't political subject. Physics wasn't political subject. There is objective truth in physics and mathematics. And so you can sort of learn.
Today, when you talk about technology and you talk about Russia, there seems to be some kind of tension. A lot of news about how Russia may have had a hand in the elections, perhaps. I mean, is it difficult as a man born in Leningrad, growing up in the Soviet Union, currently a Singaporean, doing business in a tech space?
No, it's always difficult to do business. You have all kinds of different difficulties for different reasons. Some people have difficulties because they were born in the wrong country. Some people have difficulties because they have access to wrong people. The fact of the matter is that if you do business, if it's not difficult, you're doing something wrong. So I don't think my main difficulty comes from the fact that I was born in Soviet Union. I guess Russia is a little controversial place, but the whole world is becoming controversial. You have other controversial places in making, so I don't think that's a major problem. Most of what actually drives me is curiosity. If you look at humans develop immune systems, and these immune systems prevent us from getting sick. But if you go to digital world, nothing is immune.
You've started dozens of companies. Some people have one company and they say, I'm done. What keeps you motivated and excited about starting new companies?
No, first of all, the companies I started, they are really medium-sized. They're not really big. They're reasonably successful. And probably the largest company I've ever started is Acronis. And so that's an interesting territory, just to build a slightly bigger company. But most of what actually drives me is curiosity. It's interesting to learn how the world operates. The best way to learn how the world operates is to engage with the world in doing something which is useful. And there is always something new which you can do. With Acronis, we do cyber protection, for example. I have some idea what I do next, which even more about curiosity. So curiosity is what drives me.
Your first company was started 26 years ago. The environment then is totally different from what it is today. I mean, when you try to draw the comparisons, what stand out to you?
It's actually 27 years ago, 27 and a half. What's different? It was a different country. First two companies I started in post-Soviet Union Russia. I moved to Singapore at the end of '93, and so thereafter it was a different place, different rules. For me, there was a lot of change. What's different in the world? World always goes through cycles. So I think For many years, we were all very lucky that the world was becoming more and more global. And the global world is, you can mathematically prove it's much better from the standpoint of opportunity. It's more safe, it's more secure. We don't live in the world with any big wars. And so when it started, the world was actually fragmented, right? So remember, there was Soviet Union, there was China, there was United States 30 years ago. And then everything seems to be becoming part of the global world. And that was good for business. Now the world, unfortunately, is going back in that respect. And you also have segmentation.
What's quite different for your companies is that they've always been quite profitable in the early years, compared to what we have today, where companies hardly have to prove profitability before getting capital. I mean, how do you view that environment?
I think business is always business. At some point, my Korean partner back in 1993 told me that in Korea they have a very simple rule. When you want to be involved in business, you just have to make sure that if somebody owes you money, he pays you as much as possible and as soon as possible. And when you owe somebody money, you pay as little as possible and as late as possible, but in such ways that you stay in business. And so I don't think there is so much change in that respect. There is a different financing environment, but that's that's a sort of one of the circumstances of you doing business. I think right now there is more opportunities because the world is changing. And most of the industries, as we know today, are changing to technology and knowledge-driven industries. And this is just the beginning of this change. So there is still a lot of global world which is not driven by technology and business. But if we look at the world maybe 25 years from now, it will be almost all driven by knowledge and technology. So science and technology per se. And that gives a lot of opportunity for newcomers because in the world of knowledge, it really doesn't matter how many people you have or how long are you in business or how many assets you have. It's not about your history, it's about your present ability to generate new knowledge. And that's a huge opportunity for everybody.
You talked about Acronis. It's a company that's valued now at close to $1 billion. I mean, how
it's actually over $1 billion.
It's now over $1 billion. It keeps changing and it's really fast.
No, it's
fast growing.
More than $1 billion, but I mean, we don't comment exactly how much yet.
It's a fast growing company. I mean, it's a company that deals with cyber protection. I mean, in the current day and age, how important is data and how important is cybersecurity? Quantify that for us.
It's extremely important because everything we know in the world is becoming a process which is conducted with data applications or systems. And so you have data applications and systems in every part of life. It's everywhere, and it's becoming more everywhere. It's affecting such benign industries like agriculture, for example. You cannot be successful in agriculture without data. And if you look at humans develop immune systems as they come from animals, and animals develop immune system over the past 200 million years, or maybe 4 billion years of 2 to 4 billion years of life. And these immune systems prevent us from getting sick. But if you go to digital world, nothing is immune. So everything can be broken. It can become inaccessible. It can become a burden. Somebody can copy it and it can become unprivate. It can be changed very easily. That's why we love digits, because they can be changed so easily. And it can also be taken by bad guys. So it has to be protected.
Having said that, are companies, are governments investing enough in protecting themselves?
I don't think there is such a generalization. There is about 200 countries, 196 or 194 recognized by United Nations, and there's about 240 independent territories. And so this statement is really dependent on the country. And, the countries like, for example, Bulgaria, which is part of the European Union, spend very little. And the countries like Singapore spend a lot. The thing, though, it's not just about spend. This is an area where advanced science and technology is needed, and in such areas it also has to be spent correctly. And governments are learning. I think if you think
are they underestimating the risk?
It really depends. It depends on which government you would consider. I think Singapore doesn't. Singapore spends a reasonable amount of money and pays a reasonable amount of attention. It's still a challenge. But again, if you go to many countries, it is not the same, right? So it really depends on the country. I think the main barrier is just the public perception of importance of being protected. I think nobody doubts that they need to wash their hands and brush their teeth. And if you don't wash your hands and don't brush your teeth, you will get sick, or you will have no teeth, and that's not nice. You wouldn't be able to eat. But I don't think people feel the same about being protected. And that is especially important for general population. It doesn't feel the same. It will, but it will take some time, and there will be some damage on the way. Governments are populist organizations in most places, so they have to follow what public wants. So public is much more concerned about some physical virus than about cybersecurity. And so you would better spend on healthcare than on cybersecurity if you want to be a popular politician. The best thing to do in the world is to generate new knowledge, to spread knowledge and to protect it.
And what kind of legacy would you like to leave behind?
You can actually change the world. You have limited time for it, which is your lifetime, but it's kind of fun to be able to improve it.
Sergey, your foundation, which you started, the Acronis Foundation, focuses a lot on education. Why is that so important to you?
So we firmly believe in one thing, that knowledge is solution against all evil. And so the best thing to do in the world is to generate new knowledge, to spread knowledge and to protect it. So as a company, we try to protect knowledge, but we also try to spread it, and we also try to engage with the community. We do different things with knowledge in different places. For example, in Singapore, we educate people in Singapore prison. We educate about 50 to 100 people a year.
How do you educate them? Do you
teach them basic IT skills? I mean, nowadays, without IT skills, it's difficult to find a job, and a lot of inmates, when they're coming out, they don't have the basic IT skills. In Switzerland, we educate migrants. Switzerland is a country which accepts fugitives, and so they have a lot of different people who are not necessarily qualified to find good jobs. In United States, we help veterans. United States participates in different world conflict, and that generates veterans, and so they need to be helped as well.
And you're also building a university in Switzerland.
This is very different, though. So this university is a business project. So university is a large project. Eventually it's multi-$100 million, maybe $1 billion a year project, which is not non-profit project. It's for profit. There is no limit on how close you can come to knowledge, and most of universities which exist, they can be improved. Global science and education is about $10 trillion industry, which is very much full of legacy. This legacy is created over the past hundreds of years. And only now science becomes so close to technology, to business, to economy, to life. And so really there is many things you can improve about existing universities. Also, if you think about it, you can sort of look at the universities from the standpoint of top 1% and the rest. And in reality, vast majority of things which we see, which change our lives, is produced by the top 1%. And I think maybe there is 1% of people in the world who have access to top 1% of universities. So there is really not enough universities, neither from the standpoint of education nor from the standpoint of science.
When you take a look at the economy of the future, there's a lack of clarity what skills are needed. From a technology perspective, what should an education system have?
That's a very, very difficult question. There is not any very clear answer to it. I do think, though, that there are some basic skills which are needed for every person, like, for example, basic understanding of computers and basic understanding of mathematics, basic understanding of physics. And these are the skills which are not really given enough. Historically, you would have systems which are focused on humanities, you're focused on social sciences. People learn a lot of things which are general purpose. In the future, world becomes much more analytical. You can make decisions about your personal life, about your health, about the society based on numbers. And so people who can understand numbers and who can understand the model of the world and who can use computers to sort of play with the models of the world or of the society, they can be more successful.
Growing up, you did a lot of sports. And right now, there's a lot of tie-up with sports today, including the F1, including soccer. You've tied up with Arsenal. Why is that? I mean, that's on the basis of data. How is that playing out?
Growing up in Soviet Union and then becoming Singaporean 20 years ago, you become very pragmatic. So whatever we do is perhaps not romantic enough. So when we engage with sports because it's a $150 billion industry, just sports. And then around it, there is a multi-trillion-dollar fitness industry and fitness equipment industry, which is now experiencing very, very quick transformation to digits. So everything in sports become driven by numbers, by data, and so it generates a lot of data. And so we can provide data protection and cyber protection for sports. In exchange, we can get marketing. So it's very pragmatic. We engage with sports not because we like sports, but because sports need our software. If you're engaged in football, you want to win. You want to be number one. And so it's very competitive, and so people will do whatever's necessary as long as it's allowed to win. And so there is no controversy. It's all about just winning. And so if you have the best product which helps you win the deal.
Sergey, the technology industry is under a lot of scrutiny, especially when it comes to diversity. You're a father of 7 kids, 6 of whom are girls. How is there a conflict between being a woman, a girl, and the tech space, and how do you see that changing?
I think the world is evolving in this direction, and it's hard to say what's the right thing to do. I do see that right now in my company, we have a lot of very high potential women which are performing in many cases better than men. And that's part of it because women are actually different from men and men are different from women. And so you can have different things for different people. If you think about our main belief, our passion, which is knowledge, and knowledge, most important thing is diversity of opinion and ability to openly express your opinion. And having different people, not just women and men, but people from different places, people from different background, people from whatever different views involved in the discussion, in general generates better result. So diversity is very useful. It's not just useful because it's politically correct. It's just pragmatically better business.
It's been quite a journey from being born in Leningrad, days of Soviet Union, to becoming a Singaporean and setting up a lot of businesses. When you look back, look at your journey, how do you feel and what kind of legacy would you like to leave behind?
I don't care about legacy as much. I do think that it's important to add value, and you can add value, and it's important to change things for the better. And growing up in Soviet Union and then being part of the world, you get different illusions. And so one of the illusions which you get is that humans are not important, and you feel like there is a big universe around us, and so humans are tiny. And what can we do? I mean, how is it important? And apparently, humans are the most complex known species, and most complex known object in the world is a human brain. And so you can actually change the world. You have limited time for it, which is your lifetime, but it's kind of fun to be able to improve it, and you can.
Sergey Belousov, thank you so much for being on High Flyers. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you.